President Biden's infrastructure plan covers a lot more than roads and bridges, as we just heard from Adian there. It also promises renewed electric grids, expanded internet access, modernized schools, and millions of jobs. And it sets aside billions of dollars to tackle climate change as well. It does that through investments in things like electric vehicles and renewable energy. President Joe Biden says that we're already seeing the impacts of climate change, and he says people of color and those with low incomes are being hit the hardest. But does this plan go far enough? Joining us right now to break this down is Mark Z. Jacobson, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University. Dr. Jacobson, good to see you this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, so let's talk about this plan, shall we? From your estimate and what we know about the plan thus far, does this plan go far enough to actually mitigate the effects of climate change?
Well, it doesn't go all the way far enough, but it does start. It's a good start. I mean, we probably need a factor of 10 more spending, but it doesn't all have to come from the federal government. I mean, this plan does have about $100 billion for the transmission distribution infrastructure, which is really important since we're going to grow a lot of solar and wind that needs to be interconnected on the grid. And it has about $147 billion for electric vehicles and replacing the postal vehicle fleet with electric vehicles and also school buses. And that'll help because children are exposed to diesel exhaust when they're driving these school buses, and electrifying those is very helpful. There's a lot of money going into energy efficiency in buildings, so changing the building infrastructure. And there's also money going towards extending the tax credits for solar and wind. And I'll just mention one more thing. Just before this infrastructure plan, President Biden proposed to put 30 gigawatts of offshore wind, mostly off the East Coast, but also the West Coast and Gulf Coast by 2030 and 100 gigawatts by 2050. And that's a big step as well. But we really need to transition the entire energy of the United States. We really need about 8 to 10 times that amount.
So it looks like a drop in the bucket, but certainly a start nonetheless. Let's talk about the protection for vulnerable communities. The president spoke specifically about what climate change is doing to communities of color and low income. Based on what we see from this bill, does this bill provide some level of protection against the effects of climate change for these communities?
Well, I think it has a better effect on reducing air pollution in these communities because it's going to result in the replacement of fossil fuel plants that are near, and also drilling and mining that are near vulnerable communities with clean renewable energy sources. So eliminating those sources of air pollution. In the United States, about 78,000 people die from air pollution each year, and hundreds of thousands more are ill. And a lot of these are in vulnerable communities because they're closer to the sources of pollution. So the direct impact will be to eliminate a lot of sources of pollution near these communities. Climate change, it'll take a long time for the climate to adjust back to its pre-industrial revolution values. And so we can't say that this will really reduce the impacts of climate change. There might be some minor benefits in the short term, but it'll be more longer term benefits in terms of climate, short term benefits in terms of air pollution.
All right, let's talk about jobs. We all love talking about that. President Biden says that this bill will create 19 million jobs, most of which would not require a college degree. So does that shake out to be true, and what exactly would these jobs look like?
Yeah, there will be job creation. There's no doubt. I mean, we've done our own calculations, and we're looking at transitioning the entire United States. Now, when he says 19 million jobs, a lot of these are short-term, like one-year jobs for construction. And so when we do our calculations for transitioning the whole US, we find that long-term jobs, you'd create about 3 to 5 million long-term jobs by transitioning everything. But that's a little bit apples and oranges compared, because he's talking about short-term jobs. Yeah, that number could be right, but I would divide that by, 30 short-term jobs is the same as one long-term job. But there will be job creation from this for sure. I just don't know the exact numbers based on what he's proposed.
All right. We look forward to getting that all figured out. Dr. Mark Jacobson from Stanford University, thank you so much for your insight, and your theory and all of this. We certainly appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.